Hello and a very warm welcome to the Entrepreneurial Edge. I'm Chris Bishop. Now, most people watch television or listen to the radio and forget it. Our entrepreneur this week is a man who has made a business out of doing the opposite. Oresti Patricios built a business called Ornico, which began by gathering information broadcast by the media, so-called media monitoring. It now has a huge library of TV, radio and print material and has evolved the business much further. Now, let's take a quick look at what it does.
Ornico is a company that provides brand intelligence research. So what we do is look at the media space and marketing space, looking at brand information from editorial coverage in the media, radio stations, the web, television, newspapers, etc., right through to advertising campaigns, social media campaigns. And what we do is provide brands information on how they are portrayed in the media and also how their competitors are doing in that media space. Our current CEO, Oresti Patricios, and some partners started the original business in 1984. So we're turning 30 years old next year. We're quite excited about that. Since that time, when it started, it was actually more of an advertising monitoring company, only looking at television adverts, but obviously since the last 29 years we've started adding a lot of extra mediums and also extra services. When I joined 11 years ago, we were about in the region of 20. Currently we employ over 100 people in 3 South African offices and also offices in Nigeria.
Now in the studio we have the man himself, Oresti Patricios, and you created this business more than 32 years ago. What were your beginnings?
Well, I was at varsity. I was studying a BCom. I thought I'd be a fantastic auditor, and completed my BCom. But during the time that I was doing my BCom, a really very good friend of mine and his cousin decided, like, let's make a bit of money. So, do you want to join the business? And he said, so we started doing wedding videos initially. And the name came about from my very good friend Nick and his cousin Costa. So it's Oresti, Nick and Costa, and that's how we got Ornico. Did articles, hated it with a passion. I thought that's not me at all. And we kind of started going into low budget corporate videos, training videos. And that's where the opportunity actually came, because we were renting out edit suites. And one day, J. Walter Thompson, which is a big advertising agency, approached us to freelance in their edit suite. When we saw this edit suite, we were paying a fortune to actually to utilize it from a freelance perspective. We approached them and said, listen guys, can we utilize this free of charge at any point in time? They said, yeah, you can. Just finish our work first, which we did. But while we saw it, I was in partnership now with my brother, who's Sparrow, my 2 other partners had already left. And we approached JWT if we could do their work for nothing in lieu of payment to buy this edit suite out, because we felt that there wasn't.
So there's one of those little moments where you spot an opportunity. Okay, and then you started to get into, in the early days, gathering media material, looking at trends. Now, one of the things that you do have in your proud collection is the first ever advertisement on South African television, which I'm told was broadcast in 1978. Just tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, it was broadcast in 78. It's crazy. When you look back at the advertising that happened so many years ago, you think, my God, I can't believe that they actually advertising that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was the way we really got it, because if you think, we got in 84. By about 1988, we saw an opportunity to purchase another business that was in competition with us. So when we purchased this business, this is how we got that whole library. They had the library all the way back. And but in those times, SABC used to broadcast the ads to us. We never used to have to try and monitor it ourselves.
Really?
We just put it into a library and just had a Cardex system, because there were no computers.
So I suppose the ads had no value in themselves, even in those days. You know, they just gave them to you.
Yeah, right? Well, what it was really more about competitive information. So it was competitive reviews. So agencies used to look at it on an ad hoc basis and review what was happening with their clients, but plus what was happening with the competitors. Really mostly on television. It wasn't really radio anywhere else. But then the world evolved. And the other mediums started becoming very, very important. It fragmented. DSTV, Mnet came about. There was more television stations, more radio stations. And actually SABC needed that time to broadcast because it was more valuable for them to broadcast programs and add the ads rather than just send it to us.
So how did you grow? You'd obviously worked and bought your first edit suite, as you say, in this deal with an advertising company. And then how did you grow from there on?
Yeah, I think you kind of look at a couple of opportunities and you make a lot of mistakes on the way. We thought, let's split up the monitoring business from the production business. We went into, actually, because we had relationships with agencies, we thought it would be a really good idea to do some television advertising as well in terms of producing TV commercials. And locally it failed dismally. We didn't really make much money out of it. Internationally we made quite a lot of money because we're facilitating, but it just didn't really work for us. And we kind of shrank down and carried on just doing the experiential marketing and the monitoring, and that's where it really started happening, took off. Yeah.
I mean, how much, looking back, how much of a mistake was that you think, to try to go somewhere where you weren't quite sure about it?
Well, the reality is we were losing money, but because we had so many different businesses, I think there was a bit of a pro on the one. And I think you learn a lot. You learn a lot, and it's about people. You learn about who do you hire and what kind of people. So people can have a huge skill within a particular area, but does it match up with your particular culture? And I think that's what it is. It wasn't that we had bad people. It was just that it wasn't really matching up with our particular culture. So there was conflict and there was the wrong focuses, etc.
And then you started moving into like business trends and what have you, studying brand trends as well.
Yeah.
How difficult is that business as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think no business is really difficult if you're really passionate about doing what you want to do. So I think that's what it is. It's kind of, do I really understand it? That I went from being supposedly an auditor to marketing, and yet I succeeded in the business because you're really, really passionate about it. So I think its passion plays a huge role. We're now more into the research area. And research is difficult. It has its own problems, but once you get the right people again that help you, that's where it kind of takes off.
And in this studying of trends that you talked about, I mean, if I have a brand, say, and I come to you, I mean, what can you tell me in a nutshell?
Well, I think what we do is we look at it from a macro perspective first, and we look what's happening within the political environment, the economic environment, etc., the whole pestle thing. And then we look at the across all the media and see what kind of information is coming out of it. And we look at the consumer trends. What are the relevant consumer trends, and what are the competitors doing? What are the messages of the competitors, and how are you What is the reputation of that company? And you look at the reputation by looking at specifically from a journalistic perspective. And the brand has a lot of touch points. We don't look at all the touch points. We only look at the touch points where the consumer actually touches the brand in the media space, and we give them information. But they also touch the competitors' space in the media. And so we kind of look and compare that.
There's a lot of people out there watching this program will look at you and say, here's obviously a successful businessman, he's made a lot of money, but they'll be asking as well as I'm asking you now, what were the worst times for you?
I think the worst times is, all businesses do that. I mean, there was a time, I think it was around about 1997, 1998, we had 5 or 6 businesses within the group, and we were losing money. And it was kind of really tough. We had to bond our houses, try and put some money into the business to keep it afloat. We had to do a retrenchment, which is the first and last time we've ever done a retrenchment. It's hard. You know, some people that were really doing are fantastic people, and you had to let them go. It's really difficult.
And why didn't you walk at that time and say, well, thanks, I'm going to try something else, or I'm taking my money and go to a beach somewhere?
I think we saw the opportunity in kind of pushing down the businesses, and instead of having 5 or 6 businesses, kind of really concentrating on 2 or 3 of the businesses and sticking to our knitting, I think was really where the prime area was. And once we did that, it was amazing what focus ultimately does. And I think over the years you kind of saw the seesaw of the capitalistic market at the end of the day, which is wonderful because you can take opportunities both at the bottom and at the top.
What about the recession over the last few years? I mean, the last 4 years has been very tough for companies like yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been quite good, actually. In fact, I think people need more research. In the last couple of years, We've grown by more than 20%. And in a market like this, it's actually phenomenal. We've also seen from a strategic perspective, the rest of Africa has been a really good opportunity for us. So we've got an office in Lagos. We saw this 5 years ago. So we've been in Lagos for the last 5 years. And we've got relationships with another 13 other African countries, and it's also a good opportunity.
I mean, obviously you saw the light before a lot of business people here in Lagos and how fast it's growing. Do you think there's still, this end of the continent, there's still that kind of, how can we put it, that kind of cringe towards expanding elsewhere in the continent?
I think there is. Not as much as it was 5 years ago, there's no doubt about it. I think people are excited, but there's a great opportunity. There is no data in the rest of Africa, or very, very little data at there. So what happens is it makes it very difficult for brands to go in. You can't just jump in blind. So really, once they start having data and starting kind of getting the information and traveling out there, people will feel a lot more comfortable. And I know people that have flown into Lagos, you have these preconceived ideas of what Lagos is all about. Lagos is one of my favorite cities, believe it or not.
Okay, and entrepreneurs, inspiration?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
I think Steve Jobs is amazing. I mean, he kept at the cutting edge of technology on a continuous basis, made things look beautiful. I think Steve Jobs is amazing, was amazing.
And yourself, would you like people to look at you one day and say, there you are, there's an entrepreneur who knew what he was doing, or what do you want people to say?
Yeah, I think, yes, it would be nice to be seen as an entrepreneur. I think what's nice is I want to be seen as somebody who could help people. I mean, I do mentor a lot of young entrepreneurs. And I think there's one guy that I really think will be the Mark Zuckerberg of Africa. I have a lot of confidence in him. And if he can, after he's become this Mark Zuckerberg of Africa, looks and says, well, you know, Oresti, help me, I mean, that would make me feel good.